What's up, everybody? Welcome to an actually right on time edition of SSPN Live. I'm Jude, that's Ethan, and today we're going to be talking some San Antonio Spurs. As always, we got the national championship tonight, so it kind of worked
Mm,
out that we're going a little bit earlier. We'll definitely dive into that a little bit as well. But before we get into all of that, Ethan, we do have some Spurs games to talk about. The first one was this Friday, which was definitely the better of the two games to talk about. Not a fun first half. I was watching some other stuff on Friday night, watching some college baseball, even some other NBA games, just to be honest with you, in comparison to this one. And when I saw the score at halftime, I was like, yep, that's going about as probably as I thought it would. But I got to give us credit, man. We had a huge second half comeback where we're almost able to get the win in this one. A huge game from Devin Vassell, huge game from Stephon Castle, as well as Harrison Barnes and Julian Champagnie. What were your thoughts on this one and the second half comeback here against the Cavs?
yeah, dude, it's great. Once again, though, we cannot maintain that energy for four straight quarters. But being the circumstances of the season, like I guess we'll take a competitive half at the very least at this point. But yeah, in that second half, really great individual performances. I thought Stephon had a great game. Oh, again, flirting with a triple double, just one rebound shy. Devin
Mhm.
Vassell, this is kind of what we want him to be every single night. 9 of 18 from the field, 60% from three. And then also had 4 steals. It was really the defensive intensity in that second half that brought us back into the game, coupled with some great shots. And Harrison Barnes, being that veteran presence, able to get 23 points and kind of keep us around in this game on efficient shooting as well. And Julian Champagnie off the bench, only 2 of 6 from three, so 33%, but able to put the ball on the floor, be in the right place at the right time, and get some easy baskets for 15 points and 6 rebounds. It was really a team effort overall. It wasn't just one guy doing one great thing, although you can argue Devin having 24
You're
is kind
right.
of out of the ordinary for him at this point in the season. But for us to only lose by 1 point and to win the second half as considerably as we did against the number one team in the East, I think that means a lot.
Yeah, for sure. There's not a lot of things that we can take away at this point of the season just because of the nature of the circumstances, but you got to give them credit
Yeah.
against one of the best teams in the league for fighting back, won the third quarter 32 to 24 and won the fourth quarter 31 to 23.
Hmm.
And I believe I want to say, well, no, it looks like the way that this is set up, yeah, this wasn't San Antonio. I was going to
Yeah.
say it was on the road, which it was not. But still, got to give us credit for fighting back at this point of the season. Another thing that I will say that stood out on this stat sheet for me in this one, Darius Garland, as much as he went 4 for 9 from three, we were able to hold him to 6 for 16 overall. Still got 19 and 7, so a solid game from him. But I want to say that we probably had a mixture of Stephon and Devin Vassell on him there. And obviously, Mobley and Mitchell still did their things. This Cavs team is super deep, but I think
Hmm.
holding him to 6 for 16 shooting is one thing we can look at as a positive. And Max Strus, 1 for 5 from three. I know he's just
Yeah.
kind of going to live and die by the three, but still got to give some credit on the closeouts there.
Yeah, and I think this game, as opposed to the last game, Cleveland's healthy as far as I can tell, right? Like that everybody
Yeah.
played. I think in that first game where we almost won, it was just Donovan and Darius, I believe, right? But for everybody to be playing, including Jared Allen and Evan
Mm-hmm.
Mobley, and we were even in the rebounding battle, which is huge. Bismack had 10 boards, Stephon had
Mm-hmm.
9, and then gang rebounding from the bench squad 5, 6, and 4 for Mamu, Champagnie, and KJ.
Yeah, for sure. If we want to talk about the bad in this one, probably the biggest negatives that stand out to me here are Keldon. Unfortunately, a rough shooting night for him.
Yeah.
Did have a steal on the night, but still really not too much of an impact. And unfortunately, that continued into Sunday. So as much as we're going to harp on that, awesome March and kind of end of February, the start of April, as much as it's only been 7 days, and kind of the end of March a little bit too, has tailed off for Keldon, especially this weekend, and then probably one of Blake's worst games of the
Oh
year. I
yeah.
know it's just shooting there. Did have 2 steals, so like I want to highlight that it is a two-way game, but still a real rough night there for Blake overall.
Yeah, he's definitely not the perfect player, and I'm his biggest fan in the world, right? And I'll praise him every single time he does something great, especially defensively. But he's not a finished product yet, so these kind of games are to be expected. But I like what you said about KJ. You like the 4 boards, you like the 3 assists, you like the energy plays, but at the end of the day, he's paid to score. Like that's A1 for him, right? Is to score buckets off the bench. So 3 for 10 is inexcusable, and it's kind of becoming a trend in the last couple of weeks, I would say. But hopefully he bounces back for the last couple of games here to end the season off.
Yeah, for sure. Just while we're talking about that, let's go ahead and pull up his game log here. You guys see the title of this video. It's Stephon for Rookie of the Year. That's definitely the main takeaway from these 2 games and the losses that we had, but we will dive in to some other storylines. So Ethan, we're saying it feels like that for the past couple of weeks, but if we put it in context here,
Yeah.
it's really just the last week. Maybe, okay, yes, there's the Toronto game, there's the New York game, ironically, both in wins. But in reality, there's a couple here and there, but all of March, like I said, it's really just been April, and that's just a week.
Right. But it has been a rough 3 games.
1000% very, very bad. A major fall off in comparison to March for sure. We do not, if the rest of the season ends like that, again, it's only going to be like 6 games because it's just April. But still, that definitely, that will at least be, I'll classify that as concerning to say the least. But still, I think really this is the main takeaway for me post All-Star break. But enough about Keldon Johnson, Ethan. Let's get into this second game here as I get a hold of where we are on the schedule back here against Portland, which was just an ugly one, man. We just really did not come out to play early in this one. I don't mean to be disrespectful to the guys there, but 33-18 to start. We really just weren't able to get our feet under us, weren't really too awake. We did bounce back and win that second quarter, but again, man, it just comes back to one of the stats that I think I brought up a couple of weeks ago. Post All-Star break, the Spurs are like the top, or this was at one point, so this might have changed, over the past week or two since this stat came out. But the Spurs are the top offensive team and then the worst defensive team. And I think this game is an example of that. We were able to have that 1 second quarter where we bounced back a little bit, but then in the third quarter, as much as we scored 30 points, 64 points in the second half, they scored 66.
Yeah, I think it really just proves how reliant everybody is on Victor Wembanyama, and it's been really difficult since he left for us to play defense individually, and then as well as just like team defense and communication has definitely not been there. And you can point to maybe Bismack. He's not the paint patroller that Victor is, obviously, but at the same
Right.
time, individual defense and simple switches and closeouts on solid 3-point shooters, like this is elementary stuff, and it's been bad. Especially since the All-Star break, it's been really bad. But you'd hope that these are things that we can learn from and take on in next season, Jude, once we have a fully healthy team. But I'm glad it's happening now in games that don't matter. But coming out offensively flat like we did in this first quarter, that's inexcusable. Like we have enough scorers even without Victor, right? Like Devin, Stephon, Harrison, KJ. These are guys that you can expect to
Yeah.
at least match Portland's offensive ability. But we were just, shooting the ball and shooting the ball in the air. The rim wasn't even remotely in the area. And so for our offense to be that stagnant to start the game, I have no excuse for that.
And I didn't even mention Portland's injury report in this game. No Simons, no
Yeah.
Scoot. Obviously, Aiton's been out for a while. No Jeremy Grant. I think he's been out for a while too. But the point is, this is like there's a couple third stringers for the Blazers out there, especially at the guard position where a lot of their talent is. We did see Shaden Sharp, and he had 20, 10, and 6. But other than that, we got Delano Blanton in the starting lineup, or Banton, excuse me. I don't know why I saw an L there, and I've known his name for forever, so I don't know why I said that. But the point is, lots of injuries in this one too. So again, that just adds to your point that there was really no excuse for the start like that. Man, when it comes to this game, I really
I
don't.
got one positive
Go
we can
ahead.
talk
Go
about.
ahead.
This guy did not come out flat. We got to give him credit because we dog on him quite often. Malachi Branham played real well off the bench in 23 minutes, had 17 points,
Mm-hmm.
50% from the field, 50% from three. this is like ideal Malachi. If he could be efficient in this way, this is exactly what you want from him, because he was creating off the dribble, he was moving well, spacing the floor,
Yeah.
able to knock down some catch and shoot shots, and make the right play here and there. Defensively, obviously, he's not going to be great ever in his career. He's just going to be so. But if he could get 15 to 17 on efficient shooting like this off the bench, this is perfect role for him. His problem has been next game he's going to shoot 1 for 11, and then still be bad defensively. So hopefully he can strand together a couple more games here to finish off the month of April.
This really is the ideal Malachi game. I see what you're saying, man. Off the ball, his fluidity as well. There wasn't clunkiness or kind of getting a jam in the spacing that I feel like you would notice from Malachi a lot. But the problem is also, again, going back to the injury report,
Right.
was that a product of, let's scroll down to the Blazers bench, no disrespect to any of these guys, but we got significant Rain Rupert minutes as well as Justin Minaya, in there. And, some of these guys have gotten minutes, like Jabari Walker. I remember like 2 years ago in the first Austin game that we had up there, like before Wemby was drafted. He was playing in that game and getting significant minutes. So it's not like, they're nobodies, but again, third stringers. So
Yeah.
I definitely want to give credit to Malachi. Like, you have to. Very efficient game for him, 50% overall, really solid. But yeah, solid game for Malachi. I don't want to take away from it too much because that is super solid. But Keldon, again, 1 for 11, 0 for 3.
Yeah.
Just really, really rough from him over the past couple stretch of games. We need to see a bounce back in these past couple ones. But here's one thing I will say, and again, does not excuse that. I mean, obviously, again, emphasis, need to see a bounce back here, but did have 3 blocks. And that's something that I feel like this season that has been consistent through the post All-Star break, even with these struggles, is there's been some improvement defensively. Even if it's not the greatest defense in the world, I would still say on average, this is a better version of Keldon, on the ball than we've seen in his career. That's just my opinion. Not perfect, though.
Yeah, if on his career he's a D minus, if not F plus, defensive player, this year has been at least a C plus in my eyes.
Right.
Jordan McLaughlin, solid minutes, 5 and 3 in 10 minutes, and Harrison Barnes always the steady hand. 6 of 9 from the field, 50% from 3. He has been probably the most surprising positive for me this season, Jude. And this game was a perfect example of why. While everyone else was floundering, he continued to be steady. He was a constant source of offense, decent defender, and he knows his role. He doesn't try and play outside of that role, but at the same time, when we need a basket, you can ring Harrison Barnes, and he can find a mismatch and try and create some offense for us.
Dude, he's really been on a tear these past couple games.
Yeah.
Let me pull up his game log just for the sake of that. Again, we're not even getting to Stephon Castle for Rookie of the Year. That's the main thing that I really want to talk about and beat the drum here. But Harrison over the past couple games, man, here we go.
21 in April.
He's the opposite of Keldon in comparison to March and April. And he didn't have a terrible March, but just the way that he has started April has been explosive offensively. And, this has coincided with Jeremy being shut down for the season. We didn't talk about that. There were a couple of episodes ago, we had somebody in the comments, and much respect to you, everybody can have the opinion that they want, but they were kind of going ham on Jeremy being injury prone.
I remember that.
I just kind of feel like that this is pretty obvious. We're continuing to add to the tank by shutting him down for the end of the year. You just saw Maxey got shut down. I know Maxey's a completely different player than Sohan, but I think you get what I mean, Ethan. It's another wave of everybody around the league is shutting people down, especially teams in our situation. So yeah, that's kind of that I think is added context because I think we're asking him to shoot more, but still that doesn't take away from him executing in all of these games. 50% at least in every single game from the field. Only one game where he was sub 40% from 3. We've been talking about him, averaging 42% from 3 on the season. 52% here in April, man. Just playing that perfect kind of floor spacing, modern switchable 3-4 role. Dude, I had the camera off, so I didn't see Winky's tail there.
Dude, he's
He
been right in front of you the whole time.
he's very happy and excited about Harrison Barnes and what he's done so far in April, man. But I'm with you. Him shooting a career high from three this season was not something I would expect. But honestly, when you think about it now, man, with him playing off of Wemby, and you think about the way that he played off of Steph and Clay and all those guys, then it really kind of has been a seamless fit. And again, I'm really happy that we have him on contract for one more year, and we'll see what the future holds after that.
I agree 100% with what you said about Jeremy's injury. It's just a tank job, as well as definitely getting him ready for the Polish national team this summer. Um, yeah, Harrison Barnes. I saw a tweet from Kings Nation, and it was like, Spurs, how do y'all feel about Harrison Barnes? And all the fans from Spurs fans in the comments were like, I like him a lot. Great guy, like great locker room guy, consummate professional, and a really, really good shooter. And Kings fans are responding, and they were like, yeah, I guess you're right. I think we just wanted him to be the third option. Therefore, we were always disappointed. And that's really like
Right.
a perfect example of guys being pushed into the wrong role, but on a different team are seen completely different. And it's all about perspective and expectation. Same can be true for guys like Derek White in Boston, right? Here, people were hating on him because he was shooting like 32% from three and was expected to be our second best player. In Boston, he's like fourth best player, sometimes third, sometimes fifth best player. Like it really depends on the night. And
Shoot.
he's become a fan favorite over there.
Yeah, 100%. I'm so glad you brought up the Derek example because that's exactly what I was thinking of. And, circumstance as well. Him being surrounded by more talent, and not being zeroed in on in a game plan
Right.
allows him this year. He broke some record. I think this year he broke the record for the most threes ever made in a season by a Celtic. Y'all can correct me in the comments there, but I'm pretty sure I saw that on Stat News on Twitter. And it makes sense, just with the higher volume of today's league. Like I saw with the Jokic 60-point triple double. I think there's only like three people to do that. It's
Mhm.
him, Luka, and James Harden, and that's all since 2018. So, anyways, the whole reason I make that point is kind of since then, we've seen higher shots, faster pace, bigger numbers. So it's kind of crazy to think that out of all the great Celtics that there's been, Derek holds that record. But
Yeah.
again, to your point, people were complaining about his 3-point shooting when he was here. Look what, a change in scenery. And, you got to give credit to the Celtics development staff as well. But yeah, I think Harrison Barnes, as much as, this year is not a championship season for the Spurs or a playoff season, he can kind of be a piece in that mold. Again, not saying he's going to completely be Derek White, in the playoffs. But I think, again, Harrison Barnes, a seamless fit, kind of as that off ball shooter and, 3 or 4, wherever we want him to play.
100%.
Alrighty, but let's get to, well, here, actually, before we get to Stephon, there's one more person we got to talk about, because if we were talking about Keldon being the opposite, or excuse me, Keldon tailing off in April, I would say that Devin has been the opposite of that, kind of in that same light as Harrison Barnes. Obviously not the greatest game there against Orlando, but it's bounced back over the weekend. These last two games that we talked about, against Portland, as much as it was a rough game for everybody overall, he was able, when we were able to kind of get back into the game, or it seemed like we might have a chance in the second half, he was giving us some juice there. 3 for 7 from three, 8 for 16 overall, 21-7. Got 7 boards on this one. But here's the other thing in these last two games, Ethan: 7 total steals. So we're seeing him show up on the other side of the floor. These last two games, he has been playing at what his contract values in comparison to the 3 before this that we see.
I agree. He's had a fantastic April, even a better March, to be honest, on a greater sample size. Like he's really recovered in terms of that consistency factor. However, I still think I agree with Alex in the comments. I think he'd be a fantastic sixth man. And if he can continue at this streak into next season, but coming off the bench, I think that allows him to play more to his strengths, have the ball in his hands, and be that mold that we were hoping Malachi eventually would be. I think that's out the window. But if you bring him off the bench, you have a starting lineup of Stephon Castle, um, and then he can start Harrison Barnes at the 3 spot. And at that 2, you can fill in pretty much anybody. Hopefully, we can bring back Chris Paul. We'll talk about that in a second. But if not, um, I'm
You
losing my
forgetting
train of
about
thought.
De'Aaron?
De'Aaron Fox.
No, you're good, brother. You're good, bro.
I
I
am
forget it.
forgetting
No,
about De'Aaron
bro,
Fox.
I forget he's on the team too, and I'm
It's
not
been
just
so
saying
long.
that to kiss your ass. It's just we saw him in this little spurt, and it's like we almost forget because
Dude,
he's not like the biggest media guy. No, you're totally good. The
I was
lineup you
literally
were.
thinking about that earlier today, and I was like, I'm missing somebody. Who am I missing? Yeah, De'Aaron Fox, Stephon Castle, Harrison Barnes, Jeremy Sohan, and Victor Wembanyama. And then you have KJ and Devin coming in off the bench. I think that's a spectacular tag team duo. They play well off of each other, and they have kind of complementing skill sets off the bench for us.
Yeah, 100%. I brought that up a couple episodes ago. I think that might be a month ago. At this point, kind of just the idea of him coming off the bench, or I say a month ago. I think that was actually like last week. Now that I think about it,
Losing
everything
track of time,
jumbles
man.
together in adulting, Ethan. But the point that I was getting at is that if you have him slated as that backup 2 behind Stephon, one that brings a ton of offensive firepower to the bench. And the thing that I was thinking about, Ethan, I know we've made this comparison a lot of times as we kind of try to figure out our sixth man of the future. But those stats that Devin has up there, maybe not the efficiency. I'd have to look at them completely, but just 16, 4, and 2. It's kind of reminiscent of Manu Ginobili. I'd have to go check his stats exactly, but I think that's kind of around what he would average, just because of him coming off the bench and the role that we played him in. So I could see Devin definitely playing that role. I'm not saying he's going to be Manu. That is not. I won't ever compare it. Nobody is ever going to be Manu. But being a high volume, high energy, scoring guard in the sense where he can have the ball in his hands, mainly. That role really would suit him, and I don't think that would be a downgrade for Devin. It would be, hey, go lead the second unit, and we'll even play you. We'll stagger minutes with you in the starting lineup. From time to time. And, depending on the draft too, Ethan, as much as we've talked about that, if we go with the Con Newpel, he could end up being the backup 2, and Devin could slide into that starting spot at the backup 3, and you move Harrison to the backup 4, or maybe Harrison still starts at the starting 4, and Jeremy comes off the bench at the 4. So there is that possibility as well. But I honestly really like the idea of bringing him off the bench as the backup 2 and kind of having him in that 6-man role, just because I think my takeaway as of right now here on April 7th, Ethan, is him playing with the ball in his hands, like him being more of a ball dominant guy. I think it's just better for his game. Like that's what we've kind of seen last season, because he was kind of a more of a ball dominant guy, even when Wemby was playing. The struggles, as much as the injury was a factor, and team chemistry and stuff like that, the struggles came, when he was next to another ball dominant guy. And as much as we have seen the off ball flashes for sure, like I'm not saying that he can't play next to De'Aaron in spurts, you know what I mean? Or play next to a Stephon in spurts. Again, being the main ball handler in a rotation, it just seems like he's been able to produce more when he's put in that situation.
100%. Even if you bring back Chris Paul and you let Chris be the point guard off the bench, I still think he, at that point in his career, he gives Devin Vassell a lot of those ball handling duties, and we don't see necessarily as much difficulty with that relationship as we did with Devin plus Steph plus Victor plus everybody else in that lineup. I think him off the bench is great, and if we were able to draft or sign a better backup center, there's his pick and roll partner, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily have to be Wemby. And also thinking back on the Manu comparison, Manu played most of his minutes with the starting unit. He just was the first guy off the bench. You know what I mean? And it just allowed him to play differently. And I think that's kind of what we're hoping is the impact for Devin, is that kind of frees him up to play the way that he wants to play, while also letting him play with the better players.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Michael Hunt adds some context. He says, "At fellas, if I've seen anything from Dev, it's that he can take a bigger role." So he's believing in Dev. He says, but he's better in a Danny Green 3 and D type role. with a small sample size pick and roll handler stuff mixed in. And he also says he just needs a true running mate to pick and roll with. So to your point, getting a true backup center,
Yeah.
that can definitely help. And I think that, as we've seen kind of in some of these flashes here, as he's turned up in late March and to start April here, we have seen him being able to be an off-ball sniper and an off-ball shooter. But
It's gotten
again,
better.
it's hard to kind of put my fingers on and articulate like on the court. But like I said, when he's in those scenarios where he's more of a primary ball handler, it just seems like he's more connected, in rhythm, fluid. And even on like on the defensive side of the floor, I feel like he plays better when that's the case as well. So again, we could talk about that forever, but I think we have made the point there, Ethan. I think there's a lot of appeal to Devin Vassell coming off the bench in that 6-man role. Not a slight to him. I can see the advantages of him being the starting 3 as well, depending on how the draft goes. But him coming off the bench would add a lot of firepower and give him the ball, as a ball handler and those opportunities where we've seen him have success in these scenarios late in the season.
Well, here's a great segue. It's not even just Devin's performance. It's the unbelievable performance from Stephon Castle, our rookie of the year, Jude, who is, I think, completely deserving of that starting spot and has proved this season that he plays well next to Victor, next to De'Aaron, next to Harrison Barnes, and is, I think, as far as upside potential, clearly going to be our Robin next to Victor Wembanyama's Batman.
Yeah, 100%. And that's the reason why we're so comfortable with moving Devin to the bench, because of what Stephon
Yeah.
has been able to bring. And over these past 2 games, again, in this Portland game, 22, 7, 5 with a steal as well. I understand if you want to harp a little bit on the efficiency, not the greatest 3-point shooting nights from him over the weekend, but still was able to make one in each game. I still think that's a positive when you just consider his development overall this season. And again, we talk about it, not to harp on it every time, but there's so much stuff on the stat sheet, or so much stuff that doesn't show up on the stat sheet that he does, on top of the stuff that does show up, like the rebounds and assists that we've been seeing. And still, even, if you want to harp on the inefficiency a little bit, but still 40 and 50% overall is still pretty solid to me. Able to get to the line despite that, and pretty efficient there as well. 22 points in both of those nights, 44 points for him over the weekend. Man, averaging higher stats in every category, points, rebounds, and assists specifically, than Zachary Rasache. And I don't make that point to crap on Rasache, but there's a comment here at the start, very beginning, before the stream even started, Ethan. I wasn't able to pull it up, but they were saying, don't forget about Rasache's basketball IQ and rim pressure, or something like that. And Rasache had a great game against Milwaukee recently where he had 36. And he definitely is a super solid player and can develop to a really solid player long term, an off-ball floor spacer, 3-and-D guy. But I think the biggest argument that I would say, Ethan, is I think if you put Zachary Rasache on the Spurs right now, and when I say right now, I mean like without Jeremy Sohan, without Victor Wembanyama, without De'Aaron Fox, I don't think he's making nearly as much as the impact as Stephon Castle is. I think with the physicality that Stephon brings, as well as his playmaking, on top of the shooting, improvements that we've seen, the scoring that he's brought, not to just harp on everything, but man, that's the thing about Stephon, is we've seen almost everything. It seems like we've seen flashes of everything this season. And that's why I feel like he should be Rookie of the Year. And these last 2 games, with 22, and again, it was like I was alluding to some of those other stat lines earlier last episode, Ethan. You see it a couple games ago, 22, 8-2, 22, 11-8 against Boston and Cleveland. Those are legit teams. When you look at all of these 22-point games out of the 4 that we've kind of seen recently, you can even see it against New York and Los Angeles, another, 2 more playoff teams. I could go on and on with the stat sheet. I think you get the train of thought here that I'm getting at. The dude has just been the worst team that he did that against was Portland. And I think it's pretty clear that he's the Rookie of the Year. I know we're Spurs fans. I know this is a Spurs podcast, but like I said, I think the main competition is Zachary Rasache. Statistically, he's beating him in most of the categories. And then on top of that, I think on the eye test, you can just see the impact that he's making as well. Again, not a diss to Sachet. I just think it's more of a testament to what Stephon has done this season.
Yeah, Rasache will be a really good player, but I don't even think it's close, to be completely honest with you. I would not be surprised if this was not a unanimous Rookie of the Year decision, Jude, because of every reason that you just said. And not to compare him to Devin Vassell, I don't want to like completely crap on Devin, but even when Steph is having a bad shooting night, even if he's 0 for 7 from deep, he still positively impacts the game in
Mm-hmm.
some kind of way, whether that be rebounds, assists, or just getting to the rim. I think he understands my shot's not falling. I'm stronger than everybody else out here. I'm getting to the cup and I'm going to make a tough layup or dunk over somebody or get 2 feet in the lane and kick it out to somebody who's wide open for 3. His IQ is through the roof for a guy who's only 20 years old. So his ceiling, even without a jump shot, is crazy high. So once he figures that part out and becomes a mid 30, high 30% shooter, he's going to be unstoppable. And I understand right now he's not a terrific shooter. So in putting him in the starting lineup, maybe that's not, maybe that gives you some fear, and that's completely valid. But I don't think that that's been an issue, especially with De'Aaron next to him at the point guard next year, Harrison Barnes as well, and Victor. I think there's enough spacing out there that will allow him to be effective. But in terms of Rookie of the Year, I think it's Raps. I think it's definitely Stephon Castles.
Yeah, I completely agree. And to your point, Ethan, let's just go to the Boston Celtics, the defending champs here. He shot 1 for 7 from 3 in that game, Ethan.
Mm-hmm.
7 for 18 overall, was able to get to the line, had 8 assists as well, and was able to get up to 22 points. So, yes, not the most efficient night overall, but still, that's an example of how he was able to impact the game
Mm-hmm.
and still find ways to score on a bad shooting night already against one of the best teams in the league,
Yeah,
if not the best.
take those 7 threes out, and he's still 7 for 11. Right, and that the stat he's 7 for 11 from 2, so that's really efficient as far as 2-point shots. And then, like someone in the comments said, getting to the free throw line at a really high rate recently as well.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Jacques BOF says today Castle is the best player in the squad in Victor's absence. He can take on any team. He has the highest total after Victor. He's very dominant, whatever the rookie in the game. So I think what he was getting at there is just he has been dominating, and he's been the most dominant rookie in this class this season, and I completely agree. But here, we're going to wrap up the episode here real quick, Ethan, as we go ahead and preview the national championship a little bit tonight. We got Florida and Houston here, and that is because over the weekend, Florida took on Auburn in one of the semifinals. Both of these semifinals in San Antonio, so a little bit more of a hometown flair for us. The main 2 takeaways that I have here, Ethan, 2 players I want to talk about. Walter Clayton Jr., one of the best guards in all of college basketball, arguably the best guard in college basketball this season. He's a senior, went for 34, 5 for 8 from 3, 11 from 18 overall from the field, 7 for 7 from the free throw line. In their biggest game of the year, took it over. He was one of the SEC's best players. And he may end up kind of being more of a 2 guard, even though he's 6'3". I'd kind of see him maybe in like a Isaiah Joe, kind of type mold. But he's somebody that we could have an eye on in the second round. And then also, we've talked about Johnny Broome a good bit. Obviously, Auburn wasn't able to get the dub in a very competitive back and forth game. But he did have 15 with 3 steals, 2 blocks, with 7 boards, 2 assists, stuffed the stat sheet pretty well. Went 0 for 2 for 3, but that's not really what we're looking for in Johnny Broome. What are your thoughts on these 2 guys in this Florida Auburn game?
I'm always a huge fan of getting the best player in college basketball in the second round. So if he's available in the second round, 100%. Let's take him. Let's develop him. Let's see what he's got. Because there's I guess it's few and far between, but there are instances where these guys, everyone doubts their ability to play in the NBA, and then suddenly, they're a very valuable piece on a championship contending team. So I'm totally behind that.
Yeah, for sure. Not the biggest takeaways there, Ethan, but those are really the main two guys that we could talk about there in relation to the Spurs. And the next game that we'll talk about here is Houston and Duke. Definitely some more potential Spurs prospects in this one. We'll start with Duke here because that's kind of where, like I said, more of the Spurs prospects will be. Obviously, Cooper Flagg showing out. Spurs aren't going to be in contention there, but got to mention him with 27, 2 steals, 3 blocks, 7 and 4 as well. But Con Newpel, really the main other guy who showed up in this one. Obviously, a very physical game from Houston. I think they kind of showed Duke some physicality that they hadn't seen. Obviously, the ending of the game was huge as well with their late comeback going on a 7-0 run in 15 seconds. But again, Con Newpel, 16, 7, 2 with the steal as well on 3 for 5 shooting from 3, 5 for 9 overall. And then Kaman Malwatch, not like I said, not the greatest game from him, but again, I think that kind of ties into Houston's physicality. I'm not trying to make an excuse there, but if you go back to the game prior when they're playing Alabama, another top team in the country, he had one of his best games. So again, like I said, definitely something to criticize, but I don't think just because of this we should have a blanket like, okay, don't draft Kaman Malwatch now just because of this one game against Houston.
Yeah, it does make me want to watch more tape though, because I'm somebody that really doesn't watch college basketball until it gets down the stretch. So I
Mm-hmm.
did watch this game, and I was like, "Who the heck is this Jawan Roberts? He is absolutely sunning. Come on, not watch right now." And he's only 6'7", so I'm not saying he's the guy we should
Right.
draft. But I mean, I was really intrigued by his overall game. I have no idea if he's even going to be in the draft or what his position would be in the rankings, but I was a little perturbed by the way Come On played, but I think you're right. Houston's just a real physical team, and I kind of picked that up from the way the announcers were talking about it. But I will be looking a little more deeply into his tape to kind of see if that's maybe not a trend, but like a common theme for Come On is when they play physical with him, if they have guys that are big and strong, if he kind of you know dwindles away. I'm not saying that that's the case. I have no idea, but something I'll be keeping my eye on as we get closer to the draft.
For sure, for sure. I think when you go back into it, just from what I've seen, you probably won't find that as much, but I still think this is something that is significant. This is a big stage.
Hmm.
And as much as, I did mention him playing on the Olympics and in FIBA and stuff like that, I would be lying if there wasn't a little bit of me like, okay, you didn't get a single rebound in this game. And
Right.
again, I wouldn't go out there and get a rebound. Like, shout out to you, come on, if you ever see this.
Right.
But again, definitely, there's got to be some level of criticism. As much as I still want to, stay in reality and not get too crazy with it.
Yeah, they were saying Knuppel on the broadcast. I thought it was Newpel, but Knuppel. I was really
I would,
impressed with his game, though. I really liked what I saw from him, and just kind of solidified my opinion of him as a great shooter and a solid defender based on what I saw.
yeah, 100%. I could have got the pronunciation wrong, so I'm gonna go with Knuppel there. And Doria the Exploria says it's just crazy he got no rebounds. The tallest player on Houston was 6'8".
Yeah,
Yeah, and
wild.
that's Joseph Tugler. So again, definitely like there's some level of concern there, but again, just one game as well. But to talk about Khan, one last note here, Ethan, as we wrap this up. Well, we'll get into one other thing, but before we finish. But when it comes to Khan and his defense, as much as a solid game from him here, I talked to one of my friends who is a college basketball reporter. And he was able to cover Khan when he was in EYBL, Select High School Basketball ran by Nike, if you don't
Hmm.
know what that is. When he was in high school, his senior year. And he's kind of been high on him ever since when he saw him there. He's also a fellow Spurs fan. So he was kind of thinking, we'll see how it plays out. You never know with the season and the draft that, but now it's worked out that it could be a potential to get him. And he's very high on him. He would love him, at that 8 or 9 spot, depending on where the Spurs fall. But he did tell me one thing. He doesn't think he's going to be ready to start immediately.
Hmm.
And he thinks that's mainly because of his defense. And it's not that he doesn't have defensive potential. Kind of the last episode we mentioned it. I talked about how I believe he could be, not a great defender, but does have potential to be an above average defender. That's kind of where he would put his ceiling.
Hmm.
But gonna have some work to do. If there was, with Stephon, not comparing these guys as prospects, but with Stephon coming into the league, had to work on the shooting. Khan coming into the league we'll have to work on the defense a little bit. Definitely has some flashes, has some things some positive things to grow and build off of, but that was kind of his 2 cents. And then the other thing I wanted to mention is last episode when we were talking about Asa and Khan in the mock draft and picking between them, I mentioned that Khan was more skilled than Asa. I just want to clarify that. I meant offensively, afterwards when I re-listened and was editing and stuff, I thought to myself, I was like, now that I think about that, actually, like I said, I want to clarify offensively is kind of what I'm getting at there, because there's some defensive movement things as well as just straight up, on-ball defense. I think I would classify Asa ahead of Khan as of right now. But again, it's very minute, differences between those two guys. But I wanted to clarify that comment. Not overall as a player, but more offensively skilled than Asa, where I would say Asa is a little bit more skilled defensively coming into the year. But honestly, the main thing, both of those guys are forwards. And that is a position of need for us just when it comes to depth. So I'd be happy with either of those guys at 8 or 9. But last thing here, Ethan, LJ Cryer, 8 for 14, 6 for 9 from 3, had 26 and 5, as well as a steal. He's another name, kind of like Walter Clayton Jr., that maybe in that second round, depending on how the draft goes, he could be a guard that we could end up picking up.
I'll take either one of them. Flip a coin at this point. There's a second round pick. We could just take a flyer on either of them. I will say I was shocked. I don't know if you know anything about him. I thought Tyrese Proctor was good, like really, really good, and he was absence the wrong word. Less than amazing. Let's put it that way. Again in this game, I was a little disappointed in that. That's kind of off topic, but
No, you're good. I'm glad you brought that up because that's really another name and somebody that I'd considered at the guard position in that second round. He's had some solid early round games, but this was a rough one for him. He's also from Australia, so maybe got some connections to Patty. But yeah, this was a rough one for him. And that was a name that, I would still look out for him as a name that we could consider, at 39. But yeah, definitely a rough one for him. And I think kind of later in the tournament, like I said, the first 2 games, I want to say he did pretty solid. But as the tournament went on, he kind of tailed off. So, maybe, kind of a feather in the cap of an LJ Cryer or a Walter Clayton Jr., who will be dueling tonight. So definitely the 39th pick. That's what the national championship is for tonight, Ethan.
That's what I was gonna say. They were battling over who gets to be the Spurs second round pick, who gets to be the Austin Spurs MVP next year, guys. This is what this game's for.
Don't tell me about the Austin Spurs, Ethan. Okay, I know we kind of had a hard stop here and we're already going over, but I gotta mention this, dude. I turned this game off last night. Because, what's the first quarter? Yeah, 27-17. Look at us choking, man. We can't even get to the G League championship. We can't have anything.
Look at us choking. Oh, no. This is rough. Malachi Flynn gave it his all. So did David Duke Jr. Shout out my guys. Harrison Ingram, 0 for 4 from deep. What are you doing, my guy?
Western Conference Finals.
This is the biggest game of your career. Look at Scal. Old school's Austin Spurs. Scal Labasiri on the bench. He did just as well as my guy Harrison Ingram, and he's got to be like 33 at this point.
Look, man, Jameer Nelson Jr. out there balling.
I love Jameer Nelson Jr. It's my dude.
Look, let's just give a round of applause to the Austin Spurs. In a year where this Spurs season kind of ended with a little bit of disappointment, the Austin Spurs went to the Western Conference Finals.
With Hamidou Diallo's brother? Is that who that is? Ibrahima Diallo?
That's a good point. Maybe it is.
Hopefully broken dunk.
Hey, in the second round, okay, final legitimate Spurs thought, in that mock draft that we did recently, Ethan, where we went with Rocco Zakarski, if it works out to where the second round we end up, needing a center to take a flyer on, I wasn't thinking about this, but genuinely that the point I'm getting at, that second round pick is probably going to be a 2-way spot. Maybe if we end up getting like I said, if like a Walter Clayton fell to us or something, or LJ Cryer, just because of, those guys' tenure and them kind of being seniors, maybe they could get a contract, CD did get a contract. But I think I'm not sure if Harrison Ingram's going to come back after this season is the point I'm getting at. Maybe David Duke Jr. and Malachi Flynn come back just because we've kept them around. And I think obviously they're doing good things, for the Austin Spurs. just developmentally and culturally, I'm sure. But I think there's going to be another spot open for a rookie in Austin next season.
Bring it on. Another person for Jude to be obsessed with.
I wasn't obsessed this season, dude.
Yeah, you weren't.
I
You took a
fell
year off.
off.
You took a year off. You got busy.
I had to recharge.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Again, I'm trying to end the episode here for I feel like 10 minutes now. But one last thing. Austin Spurs coach, I'm forgetting his name, but won Coach of the Year in the G League. And this was his first season. I think I texted you. Let me pull that
Yeah,
up.
you did.
I texted you his name. Here it is. Scott King. Scott King. The reason I bring this up, we've had a ton of Spurs coaches that have become NBA coaches. Quinn Snyder is one of them, who started out in the G League or the D League, whatever it was called at the time, who have ended up working through the Spurs coaching tree and becoming, coaches in the NBA. So a name to keep an eye on, even if he's not, a Pop replacement. Don't be surprised if you see a Scott King, moved up as an assistant for the Spurs moving forward, because came in and had immediate success with kind of a roster that was pretty much the same as it was the year prior. So shout out to him.
I'm pretty sure he also requested the position, if I remember correctly.
Ooh,
I think he went from the Spurs assistant coach bench to the G League head coaching job. I could be remembering that incorrectly, but they asked Mitch about it in a pregame conference, and yeah, he was really impressed with the fact that he had requested that position because it showed him that he was wanting to learn and wanted to stack positions before he got too far ahead of himself.
I see, for sure, for sure. Robert says, watch more tape. There are a lot of good centers in the draft. We could easily get one of them in the second round. Yes, we have not gotten to a lot of those second round guys. I'm not sure if we will get to them during this cycle. We're doing the best that we can. But I know that Doucet, I believe is his last name, is another French center that could be available around that 39 spot. So definitely some options later in the draft. And it gives us some flexibility with those first two picks. And I think, like we said with LJ Cryer and Walter Clayton Jr., if we go with the big early, we got some guards that we can look at later in the draft as well. But we got a little bit of an early stop, you guys. We're going to go ahead and wrap this one up. We appreciate all of you guys hanging out with us today. We hope you guys enjoy the national championship. The Spurs are on a West Coast trip, so we probably might have done our last post game of this season, Ethan. I think that's probably going to end up being the case. So
Wow.
we appreciate all of you guys supporting us there as much as the end of the season was not what we expected. But we are not going anywhere with the content. We're going to start pumping out that draft content as well as other off-season stuff. And we will still talk about the games as we continue to get through the end of this year. So you guys enjoy the national championship. And if you enjoyed the content below, hit that like and that subscribe button. If you want to stay updated with the show, hit the notification bell, go to our post tabs, or follow us on X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it, at SSPN on YT, at Jude McLaren, and at Ethan_Quintero. We appreciate you guys. We'll catch you on the next one. Go Spurs, go!